The Dune Imperium Digital Edition, the 2023 edition on Steam, has 53 cards in its base game current state. I'm going to tell you which cards to grab and which cards to avoid. And just so you know that I'm dead serious about this, here's a Python script that I wrote with the help of ChatGPT, which helped me web scrape all the cards that currently exist in this version of the game, and those are the images that I'll be using for the tier list. Because tier lists are subjective, and I want to be as objective and informative as possible when making this video, I've got some nerdy remarks about how I created the tier list, what the tiers mean, and some of the metrics that I evaluated the cards by.
Nerd.
If all that nerdy stuff doesn't interest you, here's the timestamp on screen that you can skip to if you just want to see the rankings. Dune Imperium Digital and Dune Imperium as a tabletop in its physical form are similar to League of Legends. They're fluid games with a variety of starting configurations that rapidly evolve and change as the game progresses and players make decisions. That means that in certain board states and certain situations, even really weak cards can have a drastic effect on the game, therefore winning a player that particular encounter or victory point for that specific instance of the game. In order to reduce this variance and make the tier list more comprehensive, I'm evaluating the cards based on a 100 game scenario. In other words, if you played 100 Dune Imperium games, how would these cards perform over those 100 games? I'm looking at you guys, Assassination Mission players. It may feel good to whack Paul Atreides, but that one Solari and one sword you get on reveal isn't going to make a ton of difference. Also, if you're trashing your own drone for the money, you probably have better things to spend your resources on in the first place. But we'll get to that later. When evaluating each card, I ask myself the following questions. How flexible is the card? What board spaces can it occupy? Would failing to play or reveal the card yield no benefits to the player? Does the card feel good to play? Are the card's reveal and play effects likely to contribute a significant advance toward that player's victory point count? The criteria for the tiers is pretty simple. S tier cards are cards with outstanding play reveal effects, almost guaranteed to contribute to immediate or future victory points. A tier cards are cards with excellent play reveal effects, very likely to contribute to victory points. B tier cards have decent play reveal effects, likely to contribute. C tier cards have substandard play reveal effects, unlikely to contribute. And D tier cards are substandard play reveal effects, very unlikely to contribute. Another way to think about it is that the C and D tier cards might contribute to victory points over a couple games out of 100, but the A, S, and B tier cards are the ones most likely to contribute to victory points out of that 100 game span. First, we have Arrakis Liaison. It costs 2 persuasion, can be played on blue and green board spaces, gives nothing when played, and gives 2 persuasion when revealed. Arrakis Liaison is a B tier card. Victory points are likely from the 2 persuasion on reveal, and while it doesn't give anything on play, it's flexible with blue and green spaces available, and it's also always available in the Imperium row. If you have multiple Arrakis Liaisons, they also synergize well with any Fremen Bond cards, and Liat Kynes in particular. They're never a bad choice if you have nothing else to grab in the Imperium row, and they're kind of a jack-of-all-trades card. Next we have Arrakis Recruiter. It costs 2 persuasion, can be played on blue spaces only, gives 1 troop when played, and gives a sword and persuasion when revealed. Arrakis Recruiter is a C tier card at best. I was hesitant to place it in the D tier, but that's probably where it honestly belongs. Arrakis Recruiter is a trap card. It can only be played on blue spaces, making it extremely inflexible if other players grab spaces like Carthag and Arkeen before you. Additionally, the reveal effect is kind of clunky with a foot in both camps that doesn't really accomplish much. The 1 persuasion isn't likely to get you toward a spice must flow, and the 1 sword isn't likely to help you win a conflict. The 1 troop that you get when you play it is also outclassed by cards that cost maybe slightly more, but are able to contribute to conflicts more effectively. Next we have Assassination Mission. It costs 1 persuasion, can't be played on any board spaces, gives 4 Solari when trashed, and gives 1 Solari and 1 sword on reveal. Similar to Arrakis Recruiter, this card is unlikely to result in any direct or indirect victory points. You have to trash it in order to make use of its play effect, which makes it clunky and difficult because it relies on other cards in order to get the play effect. In addition, the 1 Solari and 1 sword aren't likely to yield any conflict wins or victory points based off of cards that you could grab with future Solari. There are more efficient ways to grab Solari in the game, such as Wealth or Secure Contract, if Solari is what you're going for. For its cost, most of the time, it'll sit dead in your hand and not provide many useful reveal effects that are likely to contribute to success. Although I do admit it does look cool, he kind of looks like a mechanical pet, and I kind of do want to drive one around someday. Next we have Bene Gesserit Initiate. It costs 3 persuasion, can be played on green, blue, and yellow board spaces, draws a card when played, and gives a persuasion point when revealed. The Bene Gesserit Initiate is an excellent card. It's acquired early on in the game, at a stage where 3 persuasion is definitely affordable, it can be played anywhere, making it extremely flexible, and it draws a card on play, which can often lead to other play sequences when played early. Being played in later position, it also affords the player one last chance to draw a card and get something like Spice Must Flow or another reveal effect. It's an A tier because of how useful it is when it's acquired early. Grabbing Bene Gesserit Initiate on turn 1 or turn 2 can mean the difference between being able to chain into better cards and not being able to do the same thing. Next we have Bene Gesserit Sister. It costs 3 persuasion, can be played on the Bene Gesserit or green spaces, gives nothing when played, and gives the player's choice of 2 persuasion or 2 swords when revealed. Bene Gesserit Sister's cheap cost, maximum flexibility, and ability to grab Bene Gesserit Influence makes it an A tier card. From a reveal standpoint, it's a strictly better Arrakis Liaison, giving the player a choice of 2 persuasion or 2 swords, and it can be acquired early enough to make Spice Must Flow builds or conflict wins viable. In a pinch, it can also be played on green spaces to grab Swordmaster, Mentat, Rally Troops, etc. if you don't have any other cards in your hand that can do the job. Onto cards beginning with C, we now have Carryall. It costs 5 persuasion, can be played on yellow board spaces only, doubles the base spice harvested when played, and gives 1 spice and 1 persuasion point when revealed. I know we're stuffing the A tier early, but Carryall is an A tier card. If you have the water to finance some of the moves, Carryall can provide a highliner's worth of spice, 6 spice, in just 1 card. This makes it extremely agent efficient. If you don't have the chance to play Carryall due to the yellow spaces on the board being taken, which is a likely outcome, you at least get 1 spice and 1 reveal point for revealing it. So it's as if you played on Imperial Basin. The amount of spice efficiency generated from this card means you're not going to waste future agents gathering the same spice, and you can more quickly transition that spice to other resources, or use it to play Highliner and get water back, which then allows you to do Carryall all over again. In the right builds, it can become a self-fulfilling loop, where you're playing Carryall into Highliner, into Carryall, into Highliner, etc. Just for its efficiency, it deserves an A tier spot. Up next we have Shani, beautifully drawn. Look at that hair. It really just goes everywhere, and I think the artist did a really good job. She also looks like she's staring right into your soul. Shani costs 5 persuasion, immediately provides a water when purchased, can be played on the Fremen Influence, blue, or yellow spaces, doesn't provide anything when played, and provides 2 persuasion and the ability to retreat any number of troops when revealed. This may upset some of you that think she's hot, but Chani is a C tier pick in my opinion. The 2 persuasion, 1 water on acquire, and the ability to play Chani on Fremen spaces is all well and good, but most of the time you're going to want to reveal Chani, since she doesn't grant anything on play. To be frank, her costs don't really justify the effect she gives. Equivalent 5-cost cards like Power Play or Peter de Vries grant influence cards or extra influence themselves. Stilgar grants a water every time he's played, and his reveal effect is much more compelling, at 2 persuasion points and 3 swords. The ability to retreat any number of troops is nice in theory, but it comes before the intrigue cards are played, so you're always kind of left guessing how many troops it is you want to actually retreat. If the retreat happened after the intrigue card phase, Chani would be an S tier pick on her own. Next we have one of my favorite cards, Chome Directorship. Look at how presidential that guy looks just looking at his fleet. Looks great. I also have trouble pronouncing Directorship. Directorship. Chome Directorship costs 8 to play, immediately provides 1 influence on all the 4 influence tracks, provides nothing when played because it cannot be played anywhere, and gives 3 Solari on reveal. Chome Directorship is easily an S tier card. Getting 1 influence on every track is equivalent to 4 diplomacies, which is equivalent to 4 agents, which is equivalent to 2 total rounds of play. You acquire this card, you immediately put yourself 2 full rounds above everyone else, and that alone makes it worth its weight in time. 3 Solari on reveal is also nice because it pairs well with cards like Opulence, and allows you basically to rally troops if you're a leader like Leto Atreides. You should acquire this card before everyone else anytime you can do so. Next we have Convincing Argument. Convincing Argument is unique in that it's a starter card that cannot be acquired in the Imperium row, so it has no cost, it cannot be played anywhere, and does not provide effects when played. It does provide 2 Persuasion on reveal. So this card is basically meant to be drawn and then revealed during your reveal turn. I already spoiled it with my screenshot, but Convincing Argument is an A tier card. It's an A tier card because of when you acquire it. You start with it, and it basically leads to other higher cost cards that are more impactful when it comes to reveals or advancing toward victory points. Specifically, cards like Fremd Camp, Huzat Chatterach, Lady Jessica, Peter de Vries, Power Play, and Siege Reverend Mother are usually all acquired with 1 or more convincing arguments in hand in the beginning rounds of the game. For that reason, just because it makes accessing other cards essential, it is going to result in victory points being very likely if you reveal it or a number of instances of it. Next we have Chris Knife, and it does have a little bit of blood on it I see at the end, which is very helpful. The symbolic knife used by the Fremen people costs 3 to acquire, can be played on Fremen or yellow spaces, gives 1 Solari when played, 1 sword when revealed, and with a Fremen bond, increases Fremen influence. This card is a solid card. It's likely to result in victory points. You can play it for Fremen influence, or have a Fremen card in play to gain Fremen influence passively, which is basically like an extra agent turn. But for 3 persuasion, you can acquire cards that are more flexible like Bene Gesserit Initiate, or more impactful like Bene Gesserit's sister. Beta Keen Death Commando is another card that you can acquire for 3, which allows you to thin your deck out, and also provides some decent combat power on reveal, which I think is strictly better than possibly getting an influence if you have another Fremen card in play. It just takes too much setup to really be an A tier card. Up next we have the classic weapon of all intrigue games, the Dagger. The Dagger is a starting card, cannot be acquired on the Imperium row, and does not cost anything. It can be played only on green spaces, provides nothing when played, and provides a single sword when revealed. Most of you already know where I'm going to place this one from the thumbnail, and it's a surprising and controversial pick, but I want to walk through the logic with you. The Dagger is a B tier card. It's likely to result in victory points. Remember that we're evaluating the list based on when you can acquire these cards, and in the Dagger's case it's at the start of the game, when the game is at its most static and predictable state. Given that players have only 3 troops in their troop bank, the Dagger is the one unknown that you have to account for in the beginning, first, and second rounds of the game. On its own, it can single-handedly win you conflicts, particularly if you have 2 daggers and your opponent only has 1. In early conflicts where you get a couple influence points or spice, this in particular can mean the difference between taking off and grabbing an alliance and not. The Dagger does get considerably worse as the game progresses, and does want to be the first card you trash, but still provides a significant impact in its limited ecosystem where it thrives the best. For that reason, it's a B tier card that's likely to contribute to victory points. Up next we have Diplomacy. It costs nothing, because you start with it, cannot be acquired in the Imperium row, can be played on any of the influence tracks, only 1 persuasion, and provides nothing when played other than the influence itself. Diplomacy is an S tier card. The victory point is almost guaranteed. In conjunction with other cards like Seek Allies, and later cards that you find throughout the game, it's very likely that you'll reach 2 influence with at least any one given track, which translates directly to a victory point per track. It's also usually played in the early stages of the game, meaning that the board states are static and much more predictable. So Diplomacy is an easy use in the beginning of the game. It's 2 tiers above the Dagger because the victory point is almost guaranteed. The only qualified doctor on this list, although I wonder whether he holds a PhD or whether he's just a medicinal doctor, is Dr. Yue. He costs 1 persuasion, can only be played on blue spaces, draws a card when played, and provides 1 persuasion when revealed. Only being able to be played on blue spaces make Dr. Yue an extremely inflexible card. At 1 persuasion, he's no better than some of the other cards you start with when revealed, and in order to make use of his draw a card ability, you have to play him on the blue board space. For a couple more persuasion, you can acquire better cards like Bene Gesserit Initiate or Bene Gesserit's sister, who provide either more flexibility when drawing a card or more persuasion or combat power when revealed. It's not that Dr. Yue isn't useful, it's that he's hard to use, and there are better options for a slightly higher cost. Odds are good that if you only have 1 persuasion on your reveal round, you're winning conflicts or doing something else, so there really are just better choices. Mr. Jason Momoa himself is next on the list. Man, look at that beard. Look at it. It's regal. He looks like he's deciding whether or not to stare into your soul, have a drink with you, or just punch you right in the mouth. But I guess most 47-year-olds, some dudes look that way. Jason Momoa costs 4 to acquire, can only be played on blue spaces, provides the player the ability to exchange a water for a troop and a card when played, and provides a water and 2 swords when revealed. Duncan Idaho's interesting to rank because he's the only card that provides a water on reveal. Stilgar, his counterpart, provides a water when you play him. But Stilgar is, strictly speaking, a better Duncan Idaho. You can play Stilgar on yellow and Fremen spaces, you get a water when you play Stilgar, and the reveal effect of 2 persuasion and 3 swords is likely more useful than the water and 2 swords provided by Duncan Idaho in the long run. For those reasons, I'm going to place Duncan Idaho in the C tier. Stilgar is a better option for just 1 more persuasion, and if you're looking for the combat build provided by Duncan Idaho's water to troop and card conversion, you can really just grab Gurney for another 2 persuasion. Duncan Idaho is an interesting and unique card, but he's not one that's likely to translate to victory points in the end. Next we have Dune the Desert Planet, a card you start with, cannot acquire in the Imperium row, that is played on yellow spaces, provides nothing when played, and provides 1 persuasion point when revealed. Similar to the Dagger, Dune the Desert Planet is in existence and acquired at the start of the game when the game is most predictable, and for that reason it's one of the only cards other than the Signet Ring that can go on yellow spaces, so it's likely to lead to victory points because you can acquire spice and other things. However, it's not a card that you should rely on and that you should trash and find better cards for at the first available opportunity. Next we have what I think is the most badass looking card in this whole list, Fadakeen Death Commando. Look at that suit. He looks like he is ready to tear some stuff up. Fadakeen Death Commando costs 3 persuasion, can be played on blue and yellow spaces, allows the player to trash a card when played, and provides 1 persuasion and 3 swords with a Fremen bond. Fadakeen Death Commando's ability to trash cards makes victory points likely when he is played. Even if he's revealed with the Fremen bond, which is somewhat difficult to acquire, he still provides a meaningful boost to a conflict. The ability to trash cards is an underrated ability because it allows you to draw the more meaningful cards in your deck. If, for example, you've acquired Kuzach Haderach, Gurney, Fold Space, Firm Grip, Lady Jessica, or other high-impact cards, Fadakeen Death Commando is a card that allows you to get to those cards faster. Say, for instance, you play Fadakeen Death Commando on Carthag and draw a dagger, you can immediately trash it with this card, making him one of the better cards for filtering out your deck. You definitely want to play Fadakeen Death Commando if you don't have the Fremen bond, but thanks to the blue and yellow spaces, you should have no trouble doing that. Moving on to F, we have Firm Grip. Oh man, look at those gnarled hands. Aren't they so beautiful? And what's those in the background? Are those Sardaukar legions? They kind of look like marshmallows to me. Firm Grip is a card that costs 4 persuasion and can be played on Empire or green spaces on the board. For 2 Solari, you can convert into any influence of your choice other than Empire. If a player has the Empire Alliance, this card also grants 4 persuasion on reveal. Firm Grip is an S tier card. Its ability to pay 2 Solari for an influence pays for itself if a player plays the Welt space on any given board. In addition, the Empire Alliance secured by a player is 4 persuasion, which is a massive reveal. That's more than Peter de Vries, that's more than Lady Jessica, that's more than any other card except arguably Liet Kynes, with a large number of Fremen cards in play. If a player secures the Empire Alliance with this card, not only can they expect to generate massive amounts of influence with 100% agent efficiency, they can also expect to have relatively easy spice must flow pulls. It's a must grab anytime you see it. Following the Emperor's Firm Grip, we have Fold Space, which I think looks super cool. I mean, it looks like a wormhole, but also looks like light, and it kind of makes me want to like go through it, you know, like a crack in an alleyway or something. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But anyway, Fold Space cannot be acquired in the Imperium row because it's acquired when you play an agent to the Fold space on the board, and it allows you to play this card anywhere, draw a card when you play it, and then trash the card. The flexibility of Fold Space makes it an A tier card. You don't get anything when you reveal it, but you can play it anywhere, and it can be used in a variety of situations. This allows you to suit Fold Space to your own purposes, and you're not limited by any build restrictive qualities in your deck. Whether you're a Spice Must Flow build or a combat build, every build can make use of Fold Space, and for that reason, it's an A tier card. Up next, we have Fremen Camp. A Fremen card that costs 4 to acquire in the Imperium row can only be played on yellow spaces, and has a play effect of the player submitting 2 spice to get 3 troops. On reveal, it also grants 2 persuasion and a sword. The Fremen Camp is likely a B tier card. 3 troops is no slouch, which is about 6 swords, outclassing even a card like Worm Riders on reveal. The drawback for it is that you have to pay 2 spice, and you can only play it on yellow board spaces. In some Dune situations, you'll have no yellow spaces to play this card on. Still, the 2 persuasion and 1 sword are respectable, and for its cost, you can find yourself handedly ahead in a conflict if you've got the 2 spice to pony up. It also pairs well with cards like Worm Riders or Carryall, which allow you to get large quantities of spice. Although it doesn't directly translate to victory points, it is a card that significantly advances a player's board state and allows them to gear towards combat-focused or reveal-focused builds without feeling guilty about it. Coming to one of the Bene Gesserit cards in the list, we have Gene Manipulation. A card that costs 3 in the Imperium row, can be played on green or blue board spaces, allows the player to ditch a card when played, and possibly gives the player 2 conditional spice, and also awards the player 2 persuasion when revealed. This card very likely leads to victory points as well. At just 3 cost, it outclasses Fadakeen Death Commando in its ability to ditch a card and possibly reward the player 2 spice, but it also rewards the player for not playing the card with 2 persuasion. It's not as conflict-focused as Fadakeen Death Commando, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be used in conjunction with other Bene Gesserit cards like Other Memory and Kuzach Haderach to advance the player's board state. Although the 2 spice is situational, it is equivalent to and or superior to Fadakeen Death Commando in its reveal effect and ability to trash a card. In continuing with the theme of trashing cards, we next have Guild Administrator, a 2-cost persuasion card that can be acquired in the Imperium row, can be played on Space and Guild or yellow spaces on the board, and provides the player the ability to trash a card. Guild Administrator is an A tier card because of its cost. It's very easily acquired, making him acquirable on round 1 of play, and allows the player early access to Fold Space in the event that they don't draw a Diplomacy or Seek Allies. You also have the ability to start trashing cards very early on in the game, which allows you to get towards your better draws quicker. The Bene Gesserit card Gene Manipulation sort of barely makes the A-list cut, but Guild Administrator for its cost is definitely an A-list card. It has the same effect as Gene Manipulation, doesn't reveal as many persuasion, but costs only 2 points. Its cost is really what makes it an A-tier card. Keeping with the theme of the Spacing Guild, we next have Guild Ambassador, a 4-cost card acquirable in the Imperium row, only eligible on green spaces, that awards the player's choice of a Spacing Guild influence or 2 spice. On reveal, if a player has the Spacing Guild alliance, they can also transform 3 spice into a victory point. Similar to Firm Grip, Guild Ambassador is an S-tier card simply because it's so flexible. He's difficult to play, but if you manage to play him, you can easily get yourself another agent's worth of influence with the Spacing Guild, or give yourself 2 spice, which is equivalent to one of the yellow spaces on the board. The player's flexibility to choose between a Spacing Guild influence allows them basically an extra agent of play, or 2 spice, which is equivalent to a free Haga Basin. Either way, you're basically packing 2 agent turns into 1. Should a player have the Spacing Guild alliance, they also have access to extra victory points. The cost for those victory points is not too much more expensive than the play effect too, which is helpful. Finally, the last of the guild cards, Guild Bankers. Guild Bankers cost 3 persuasion in the Imperium row, can be played on Empire, Spacing Guild, or green board spaces, gives no effects to the player when played, and has a reveal effect of the Spice Must Flow costing 3 less to acquire this turn. Guild Bankers is an S tier card, almost certainly going to yield victory points. You can acquire it early enough in the game at 3 persuasion to allow yourself to ramp up to 6 persuasion, and it provides maximum flexibility on a reveal turn. There are more than likely going to be rounds where you'll have 6 or more persuasion, and it lowers the barrier to acquiring Spice Must Flow cards from the steep 9 persuasion that it costs by default. In all likelihood, you'll be able to get 1 Spice Must Flow out of this card if you have it in your hand this turn. If for some reason you know you're not going to be able to acquire the necessary persuasion to make use of its reveal effect, you can also play it as a Diplomacy space to the Empire or Fold Space board spaces. Following Guild Bankers, we have Gunthopter, and man, man, does that missile look mean. Gunthopter's a 4-cost persuasion card available in the Imperium row, playable on blue and yellow spaces, the play effect being that each opponent loses 1 garrison troop, and the reveal effect being 3 swords plus the ability to deploy a troop from your garrison to the conflict. Gunthopter for its cost is a solid card. Its reveal effect in particular is equivalent to 5 swords, 2 from a troop and 3 from the actual swords it yields, putting it on par with Fremen Camp and Worm Riders in terms of its combat value. However, in comparison to the other 4-cost cards, it's not nearly as effective as something like Firm Grip or Guild Ambassador with respect to victory points. So for that reason, I'm going to place it in the B tier. It's a solid card that's likely to convert conflict wins to advantages, but is one that you'd prefer to reveal than play, and also one that stacks up poorly in terms of its other 4-cost competitors. Up next, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin in the Dune movies. And what a range that guy has, going from Llewellyn Moss and No Country for Old Men to this guy. 2 totally different characters in 2 totally different universes, and he nails them. Anyway, Gurney Halleck is a 6-cost card that you can acquire for 6 persuasion in the Imperium row, can only be played on blue spaces, yields 2 troops and a card when played, and can reveal for 2 persuasion and the ability to deploy 2 troops to the conflict for 3 Solari. Gurney is an S tier card. Even though he can only be played on blue spaces, he still gives a decent reveal effect that's equivalent to, or if not superior than, most of the cards on this list, and he also has the addition of allowing the player to bankroll some Solari into some combat presence with at least 4 swords. Ideally, you want to play Gurney for the 2 troops and card though, and on a space like Arakeen, that's 3 troops and 2 cards. Gurney can absolutely help you turn through your deck and is an absolute menace when it comes to combat presence. His flexibility with respect to combat-oriented builds also means you don't have to play him and you can still get involved in the conflict. Overall, just a great card, despite his lack of flexibility. Pound for pound, Gurney is one of the best cards out there, and that's why he ranks so high. It's his efficiency, not his flexibility, that grant him the S tier ranking. Following Gurney, we have everything that he's worried about, like Imperial Spies. The Imperial Spy is a 2-cost card that has an Emperor faction, playable to only the Emperor's space, that you can trash for an intrigue card. On reveal, he gives 1 persuasion and 1 sword. I thought a lot about where to place Imperial Spy because, on the one hand, the Imperial Spy is a strictly better diplomacy that's Empire-specific. You can get an intrigue card if you trash it, and it does reveal a sword in addition to a persuasion. However, similar to Arrakis Recruiter, the 1 persuasion, 1 sword reveal isn't likely to be all that impactful, and the intrigue card can be a crapshoot at best. If there was a tier between C and B tier, where the victory points were like moderately likely, that's probably where I would put this card. I'm going to be a little bit mean to it and place it in the C tier with the understanding that the intrigue card can be a bit random, but this could arguably be a B tier card as well. Like I said, it's really in the middle. Up next, we have the Big Daddy, the Muad'Dib, the Paul Atreides transformation Kwisatz Haderach, an 8-cost Bene Gesserit card that allows you to send one of your agents from anywhere to any board space, even if occupied, and draws you a card on top. Yeah, this card is badass, and it's going straight to the S tier spot. This card is basically a free Mentat. It's like as if you took the Mentat space without actually taking it, and you can place that Mentat anywhere. It's a free turn, and depending on how early you grab it, you can get several uses out of this card. This card also allows you to play for spaces like Highliner, Conspire, Carthag, any of those really contested board spaces late game, and it's just an absolute menace to have to play around if you know somebody else has it. For those reasons alone, it's an S tier card. And we have the beauty herself, Lady Jessica, who was Duke Leto Atreides' concubine. She's a 7-cost card, immediately grants 1 influence track on any track of your choosing, is playable to the green, blue, yellow, and Bene Gesserit spaces, provides 3 persuasion and a sword on reveal, and 2 cards when she's played. Yeah, like the Kwisatz Haderach, she's an S tier card. Her ability to draw 2 cards by herself, excluding any board space effects, is incredibly impactful. You can play her on a space like Research Station to draw 5 cards from your deck, or play her on the Bene Gesserit secrets or selected breeding spaces to progress your Bene Gesserit influence. There's really no way that you can go wrong with Lady Jessica. She's an extremely flexible card, and you get an influence on top of that, so you just went all around with this card. Not much else to say about it other than all those positive things. Liet Kynes is next. 5-cost card with the Emperor and Fremen tags, provides you an Empire influence upon purchase, and is playable to the Fremen and blue spaces. No effects on play, but 2 persuasion for each Fremen card you have in play, including this one. Also, I just realized after reading the books that Liet Kynes is a dude. That kind of looked like a woman to me, to be honest, and I had no idea until I actually read Frank Herbert's book. Liet Kynes is another tricky card because Liet Kynes can be incredibly impactful if you build the deck with Fremen cards. If you stack the deck with Fremen cards, you're pretty much guaranteed a spice must flow each turn when you reveal Liet Kynes. Liet Kynes, just based off of the Fremen and blue spaces with no play effects, is designed to be revealed, and you do get an Empire influence when you play the card. For those reasons, I'm going to place Liet Kynes in the A tier. Liet Kynes is a good card if you reveal him. Even if you have one other Fremen card in play, like an Arrakis Liaison, that's 4 persuasion right there. So you're basically harvesting the reveal effects of any Fremen card that you play. You don't have to feel bad about playing cards like Arrakis Liaison or Fadakeen Death Commando when you don't get their reveal effects. The only reason I think this card is an A tier, though, is because of the Empire influence that you get, which is another agent. If you didn't get that Empire influence for 5 costs, I'd probably put it in the B tier, to be honest with you. I don't really ever feel good about grabbing Liet Kynes, but maybe I'm just not skilled enough of a player to really have made use of him yet. It's a tricky card to make use of, but I've seen players do some serious work with him, and I think just for granting an influence, he deserves a place on the A tier. I don't like it. Subjectively, I want to place Liet Kynes lower on the list, but objectively, it's just too good of a card. In continuing with the Emperor theme, we have Opulence, an Emperor card that costs 6 persuasion, playable only to the Empire spaces that yields 3 Solari when played. I also just love how this market looks. It does look opulent, rich. It kind of looks almost gaudy, almost kind of like the North Korean hotel, if you've ever seen pictures of that, but I think that's how an empire is supposed to look, all rich and corrupt and all that jazz. So yeah, Opulence is going to go in A tier as well. Very strong card, synergizes incredibly well with cards like Firm Grip. For example, if you play Opulence, you get 3 Solari, you play it on Wealth, that's 5 Solari, and then you can use Firm Grip to then just take influence. Yeah, so if you have Empire and Firm Grip together, combined with some other Empire cards, I think that Opulence is very strong. It's similar to Liat Kynes in that you have to build around it, but still is very likely to lead to victory points if you do that. The 6 Solari, upon reveal to get a victory point, is similar to Guild Ambassador in that it also provides you a means to funnel excess resources into victory points, which makes it even more likely to yield to victory points in the end. Up next, we have Other Memory, a Bene Gesserit card that costs 4 Persuasion in the Imperium row, can be playable on blue and yellow spaces, draws a card when played, or draws a Bene Gesserit card from your discard pile, and reveals for 2 Persuasion. Other Memory on one hand is a strictly worse Bene Gesserit Initiate, because Bene Gesserit Initiate can be played to green, blue, and yellow spaces, and draws you a card. However, Other Memory does also have the distinction of granting 1 more reveal point than Bene Gesserit Initiate, and it also has the very powerful ability to draw a Bene Gesserit card from your discard pile. That can include cards like Lady Jessica and Kwisatz Haderach, which are both S-tier cards on the list, and can even draw cards like Gene Manipulation if necessary. There are very powerful Bene Gesserit decks that I've done where I've played Other Memory into Gene Manipulation into Kwisatz Haderach, or some combination of any of those 3 cards. So, similar to Opulence, it does synergize very well with the Bene Gesserit factions. On the other hand, if you don't have any Bene Gesserit cards, this card is strictly a worse Bene Gesserit Initiate, with the exception that it reveals 1 more. I'm going to hesitantly place this in the A tier. I think that drawing another Bene Gesserit card from your discard pile and being able to tutor that out is just too strong an effect to have it in B tier, but it's a card that is going to lead you to other cards that lead you to victory points. You're probably not going to get any victory points from this card on your own. Still, the ability to tutor is unique, and it's found only in this card and a handful of others, so I think for that reason alone, it's an A tier card. Up next, we have Peter de Vries, the Mentat for the Harkonnen family. Peter, you talk too much. That was my best Baron Harkonnen voice. I don't do very well with like the raspy, fat guy voices. Anyway, he costs 5 Persuasion in the Imperium row, can be played on green and blue spaces, gets an Intrigue card when played, and yields 3 Persuasion and a sword when revealed. The ability of Peter de Vries to repeatedly generate Intrigue cards, I think immediately places him in S tier. If you consider a card like Imperial Spy, which you have to trash to get an Intrigue card, then Peter de Vries for 3 more Persuasion allows you the repeated ability to generate Intrigue cards, and also allows you more Persuasion than Imperial Spy does. For 2.5 times the cost of an Imperial Spy, you gave yourself the ability to repeatedly generate Intrigue cards and more reveal points than the Imperial Spy himself, and I think that efficiency is what places Peter in the S tier. The X factor of Intrigue cards also cannot be understated. Cards like Stage Incident, Rapid Mobilization, and Water of Life allow you to get victory points through the Intrigue cards themselves, and Peter is one of the few sources of Intrigue cards in the game. Following Peter de Vries, we have the thing that he's most famous for doing, which is a power play. 2 influence instead of 1, and you trash the card. No reveal points. Cost 5 in the Imperium row, and you can play it on any of the influence spaces. It's basically a strictly better diplomacy that you don't get any bonuses for revealing. By the definition of the tiers, power play is an S tier card, simply because it does actually guarantee a victory point. In fact, it's one of the few cards, if not the only card on this list, that literally guarantees you a victory point, with the exception being the Spice Must Flow, which we haven't gotten to yet. Power play is not only agency efficient, it literally will grant you a victory point if you're anywhere on the influence tier except for the first spot. Up next, we have Reconnaissance, a starting card that you cannot acquire in the Imperium row, and therefore a card that has no cost, can only be played on blue spaces, does not grant any play effects, and grants you 1 Persuasion on reveal. I want to be mean to Reconnaissance and place it in C tier, but the truth is, as a starting card, it's one of the most valuable cards you can have, because it pretty much determines whether or not you can move to blue spaces or not. For that reason, similar to Dagger and Dune the Desert Planet, I'm going to give it a B tier rating. It's not that the card itself is a strong card in general, it's that the card itself is a strong card for when you acquire it, which remember is the basis for this tier list. Chani, of course, in raw power level is stronger than Reconnaissance, but you can access Chani far later than you can access a card like Reconnaissance, and Reconnaissance does allow you access to blue spaces to gather resources. For that reason, it's a B tier card. Up next, we have Reverend Mother Mohaim. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I probably should, given that I've read some of Frank Herbert's book. It's a 6-cost card with the Emperor and Bene Gesserit factions that allows play to the Emperor Bene Gesserit spaces. If you have another Bene Gesserit card in play, each opponent discards 2 cards, and if you reveal her, you get 2 Persuasion and 2 Spice. Yeah, she's an S tier card. The ability to get 2 Spice, 2 Persuasion on reveal is an insane reveal. However, if you also have Bene Gesserit cards in your deck, you can really make your opponents make some tough choices when ditching their hand and limiting their options, which is always good. Denial in Dune is superior to advancing your own plan, rather like chess. And furthermore, if you have no Bene Gesserit cards in your deck, she's a strictly better diplomacy. Reverend Mother Mohaim is an absolute powerhouse, and you can play her with cards like Other Memory to have your opponent ditch 4 cards if you have 3 agents. You'd have to play like Bene Gesserit Initiate onto Mentat, into Reverend Mother Mohaim, into Other Memory, into Reverend Mother Mohaim, but you could totally trash your opponents with that. And that's just one example of the many use cases that card provides. Up next, we have Sardo Ukar Infantry, a 1-cost Emperor faction card that gives 2 swords and 1 Persuasion point on reveal, and nothing when played. To be fair to Sardo Ukar Infantry, it does give 2 swords, and probably is equivalent to Duncan Idaho in terms of reveal, but it gives nothing when you play it, and you pretty much have to reveal it in order to make use of it. If you don't end up placing any conflict spaces, the Sardo Ukar Infantry becomes essentially worthless, so I'm placing him in C tier. For 1 more Persuasion point, you can grab cards that are more impactful, like Arrakis Liaison, even Spice Hunter, given that you can use Spice Hunter to give influence. And if you spend 1 more Persuasion, you have access to more flexible cards that provide better results, such as Bene Gesserit's Sister and Bene Gesserit Initiate. 1 Sardo Ukar Infantry is not that useful, but a Sardo Ukar Legion is definitely more useful than just 1 infantry. A 5-cost Emperor card playable on the Emperor in green spaces, Sardo Ukar Legion gives you 2 troops when played, and allows you to deploy up to 3 troops from your garrison to the conflict without paying any Solari. This is going to be an A tier card for sure. The ability to have 2 troops when you play it, in addition to any Empire effects, mean that you can generate an army really quickly. You can play this on rally troops or conspire for a host of troops in your troop bank. Although you don't get the card draw that you get from Gurney, you do get the ability to deploy any amount of troops from your troop bank. Gurney allows you additional troops, but you have to play them to the conflict for 3 Solari, so Sardo Ukar Legion is still a very strong card for combat-focused builds, and even if you're not focused on conflict, and maybe say an Empire alliance, Sardo Ukar Legion still allows you to fight for some combat presence. Overall, a very strong card. Up next, we have Scout, a 1-cost card of no faction affiliation that is playable on blue and yellow spaces, no effects when played, and 1 persuasion, 1 sword on reveal, with the option to retreat up to 2 of your troops. Scout is a strictly worse Shawnee, although for a fraction of the cost. The big thing with Scout is that it's not really meant to be played, it's meant to be revealed, and the problem with Scout is that the retreats happen before all the intrigue cards, similar to Shawnee. I'm gonna play Scout in the D tier. It's really unlikely to generate you any victory points. Sardaukar Infantry at least gives you an extra sword, and that's why he's 1 tier above, because he's slightly better at a conflict focus build, but Scout really doesn't allow you to salvage many of your troops, because you may end up retreating troops where somebody has an intrigue card to beat you at anyway, so it's difficult to know how many troops to actually retreat. Seek Allies is a starting card, costs nothing because you can't buy it in the Imperium row, playable on all the faction spaces, and when played, you trash it. Basically a worse diplomacy, but still allows you to work with diplomacy to acquire victory points. For its state in the game, a victory point is almost guaranteed. When used with diplomacy in the first couple rounds, you're gonna get 2 influence, you're gonna get that victory point, and again, the goal of this tier list is not to gauge how powerful the cards are over time, just how powerful they are in the most likely board state when you acquire them. And for that reason, Seek Allies is an S tier card. You have it when the board is at its most static, and without it or diplomacy, you have no way to get faction influence. So it's really important in the early game, but its importance, similar to Dagger and Dune the Desert Planet, and Reconnaissance quickly diminishes as the rounds progress. Up next, we have Shifting Allegiances. A 3-cost card, acquirable in the Imperium row for 3 persuasion, can be played on green and yellow board spaces. On play, it allows the player the ability to go down 1 influence in any track to go up 2 influences on any other track, but you have to pay 2 spice for this. It's basically a power play that you pay 2 spice for, but that you can also reveal for 2 persuasion. This card is very likely to get you a victory point. It's not an S tier because it does require 2 spice to play and only nets you 1 influence. However, it still can be very useful later in the game. Typically, whenever you acquire it, you can still get some good value out of it. Also, if you choose not to play it, you can still get 2 persuasion, so it makes it equivalent to an Arrakis Liaison if you can't utilize the play effect. Working our way down toward the end of the list, we have Siege Reverend Mother, a 4-cost Bene Gesserit Fremen card, playable on the Fremen and Bene Gesserit spaces. You trash a card on play, and if you have a Fremen bond, you get 3 persuasion and 1 spice. The flexibility of Siege Reverend Mother to trash a card when played, even if you don't have the Fremen bond active, makes it a card that is very favorable in Bene Gesserit and Fremen-based builds. The ability to trash a card is worth its weight in gold, and pretty much allows you to transition to better spaces. Does work well if you have Fremen bonds, but the effect relative to its cost is already overshadowed by cheaper cards like Beta Keen Death Commando, Guild Administrator, and Gene Manipulation, so it does have a steep price for its play effect. For that reason, I'm going to put it in the B tier. It's useful, and it can offer some nice reveal effects, but its cost is also steep relative to its play effects. Up next, we have Signet Ring. The effects of this card vary based on the leader. It's a card you start with, so it's not acquirable in the Imperium row. It's playable on green, blue, and yellow spaces, and provides 1 persuasion on reveal. Signet Ring is tricky to rank because its effects vary so wildly based on the leader. The Harkonnen Signet Ring allows you to pay 1 Solari for an intrigue card, which is an S tier ring in and of itself. However, Ariana's Signet Ring yields you a water, and Ilbin's Signet Ring yields you a Solari. Because these effects vary so much and are so leader and player dependent, I'm just gonna put it in the B tier, sort of as an average of the best and worst Signet Rings. But Signet Ring is a flexible card, which makes victory points likely. Up next, we're back to the Spacing Guild with Smuggler's Thopter, one of my favorite cards in the game. Costs 4 persuasion, is a Spacing Guild card, only playable on the yellow spaces, and for 2 Spacing Guild influence, you can draw 2 cards. It also reveals 1 spice and 1 persuasion on reveal. Smuggler's Thopter is a card that I'm going to go ahead and place in the A tier. Its 2-card draw is equivalent to Lady Jessica's play effect for nearly half the cost, and that alone makes it an extremely cost-efficient card, even if it is inflexible and does require 2 influence with the Spacing Guild. I'll also say that its reveal effect of 1 spice and 1 persuasion are decent, so if you don't manage to play it, it's not the end of the world. Smuggler's Thopter also pairs well with cards like Shifting Allegiances or Spice Smuggler, which we haven't gotten to yet, so its reveal effect is not to be underestimated. Its cost really is what makes it an A tier card. If Smuggler's Thopter costs 5 or 6, it would be almost in the C or D tiers, but because it costs 4 and can be acquired relatively early in the game, you can set up for Smuggler's Thopter to really churn through your deck and make the most out of your combat and spice must flow endeavors once you've drawn all the cards in the world. Up next, we have Space Travel, a Spacing Guild card that costs 3 persuasion, playable only to the Spacing Guild space that draws a card on play and has 2 persuasion on reveal. Space Travel is an interesting card because in a perfect world it can do exactly what it says. It can draw you a card, that card could be the fold space from your discard pile, and then you could actually use fold space anywhere. So it does allow you to chain into a really versatile chain of events. However, there's also the good chance that you will not be able to play Space Travel when you acquire it because somebody else has taken the fold space slot on the board, and it's unlikely that you'll be able to access Highliner when you have Space Travel in your hand for the first time. This pretty much makes it an Arrakis Liaison at 150% of the cost and with fewer options. Given that I've ranked Arrakis Liaison at the B tier, I'm also going to have to rank Space Travel at the B tier because Space Travel is essentially a better Arrakis Liaison that can go to fewer spaces. That said, I think most of the time that you have Space Travel in your hand, you're going to have to jump on that fold space fast, or you're going to end up with basically a more expensive Arrakis Liaison in your hand, so I think the two are equivalent in terms of how likely they are to give you victory points. Not saying that Space Travel is a bad card, just that its ability to only be played on the Spacing Guild spaces make it so that it's kind of difficult to get the card draw reward from being played. Up next we have Spice Hunter, a Fremen-affiliated card that costs 2 to acquire in the Imperium row, can be played on Fremen or yellow spaces, grants the player nothing when played, and reveals for 1 persuasion, 1 sword, and 1 spice with the Fremen bond. The 1 persuasion, 1 sword theory you already probably know my stance on by now, not likely to help the player either in reveal or combat scenarios. The 1 spice is nice if you have a Fremen card in play, but if you don't, it's pretty much equivalent to a diplomacy. You also have to acquire this card though, and for 2 persuasion, you could acquire better cards when it comes to conflict or reveal. Arrakis Liaison and even Sardaukar Infantry really doing a better job at fighting than Spice Hunter would. All said and done, the Spice Hunter reveal effects aren't that great, so I'm going to place it in the C tier. That may upset some people, and that might be a controversial pick, but I think for 2 persuasion, you can acquire better cards, the Voice and Arrakis Liaison being 2 of them. If Spice Hunter gave 2 persuasion or 2 swords instead of one of each, it would probably be a B tier card. Up next we have Spice Smugglers, a Space and Guild card that costs 2 Persuasion in the Imperium row, playable only on blue spaces, and allows the player to transmute 2 Spice into 3 Solari and a Space and Guild influence. Spice Smugglers is tricky to rank because it's very inflexible, only being able to be played on blue spaces, but does grant a Space and Guild influence and 3 Solari, which is equivalent to any Space and Guild play and secure contract. So it's 2 agent turns for the cost of 2 Spice. Its reveal effects aren't great, it's got the standard 1 Persuasion, 1 Sword. If there was a tier between B tier and C tier, that's probably where this would go. I'm gonna go ahead and be mean to it. I'm gonna put it in C tier just because it is so inflexible and does require 2 Spice to get the condition of 1 influence and 3 Solari off. I think if this card had a few more spaces it could go to, if it was a blue-yellow or blue-green card where you could pay 2 Spice, that'd probably be one thing. But the truth is that in most Dune games, those blue spaces are going to be really crowded. You're not going to be able to get the play effect off most of the time, or have the 2 Spice necessary to make that condition true. So it's difficult because you not only have to find a space to play it, you also have to have the necessary resource to get its play effect, and those 2 things make it difficult to play. Revealing it is also not great. Up next, we have the man himself, Lisanogayip Dilgar, 5-cost Fremen, playable on the Fremen, blue, and yellow spaces, yields a water when played, 2 Persuasion, and 3 Swords when not played. Dilgar is likely to generate a victory point. I'm going to put him in B tier. He's got 5 costs, which is pretty steep. For 5 costs, you can grab Power Play instead of Stilgar and guarantee yourself a victory point. But Stilgar also has the unique ability of being a card that generates a water when you play him. So you could go Still Suits and get yourself 2 water right there, and then get yourself a free research station, or Great Flat, if you choose to, which is a pretty nice ability unique to Stilgar or Ariana's Signet Ring. Stilgar's also decent on reveal, basically being an Arrakis liaison that fights for you with 2 Persuasion and 3 Swords, and he's playable to the Fremen spot, so he's pretty flexible. The reason he's in B tier is because of his steep cost. Like I said, at 5 Persuasion, you could look at grabbing Peter de Vries, Power Play, Guild Ambassador, Firm Grip, a number of cards that cost less or equivalent to Stilgar, but he's still pretty good for what he offers. Up next, we have Test of Humanity, a 3-cost Bene Gesserit card that's playable to the Bene Gesserit, green, or blue spaces. Each opponent chooses between discarding a card or losing a deployed troop, and 2 Persuasion on reveal. I think this is just a really solid card. It's effectively an Arrakis liaison that offers a few more effects and is playable to the Bene Gesserit space, also offering a play effect. If you think about Arrakis liaison, he's playable to blue and green for 2 reveal with no effects. This is a card that costs 50% more than Arrakis liaison, grants you an effect, and is playable to the Bene Gesserit space. And because it dwindles strength from your opponents, victory points are very likely. For that reason, I'm giving it an A tier spot. Up next, we have the Spice Must Flow, a 9-cost card that immediately translates to a victory point. You can't play it anywhere, but it does grant a Spice on reveal. Just by definition, this card grants you a victory point when you acquire it, so it is an S tier card. Entire builds in this game are centered around this card, and is one of the necessary means for victory points. At some point or another, I think most people that play Dune will do a Spice Must Flow rotation in their playthrough at some point, so it is a vital card and one that you have to build towards. Enough said. Getting close to the end of the list here, we have the Voice, a Bene Gesserit 2-cost card in the Imperium row, playable to blue and yellow spaces. Choose a board space, opponents can't send their agents there this round, reveals for 2 Persuasion. The Voice, being unique enough to block your opponent's any board space, is a massive accomplishment, incredibly powerful but also situational. I think the fact that the Voice pays for itself in reveal points puts it on par with Arrakis Liaison, but you're also just as flexible as Arrakis Liaison, and you get a really unique and powerful effect when you play it. For that reason, I'm going to place the Voice in A tier. It's definitely useful if you want to hog a board space while you acquire the resources to play it, just to block other people from going there until you have the necessary resources. For that reason, it is likely to grant you a victory point, very likely in fact, because your opponents cannot play around their terms, they have to play around your terms. And anytime you can deny your opponent's victory points, it's equivalent to gaining you victory points. The Voice is one of the top cards in the game, in my opinion. It's almost S tier, but again, it's a little bit too situational to be flexible every time you use it. I've definitely seen the Voice wasted on a couple spaces where they just needed something to play and they played the Voice. So I think for its cost, it's incredibly efficient and also a unique card, but that doesn't necessarily make it S tier in its own right. And to round out the list, we have some S tier bangers. The Fear Hawat, basically a fold space except for green, draws you a card, and if you don't play him, gives you an intrigue card, so sort of the inverse of Peter de Vries. The Fear Hawat is just an S tier card. For his flexibility and cost, you really cannot go wrong picking him up. You're always going to feel good revealing him, you're always going to feel good playing him. There's really no situation in which you won't be able to play through Fear Hawat, and you get a card on top of it, so it's basically like a fold space that keeps coming back into your hand that also gives you intrigue cards. And to round out the list, as my girlfriend would say, the Worm. Worm Riders, 6-cost Fremen card that playable on blue and yellow, gives you 2 Spice, and if you have 2 influence with the Fremen, you get 4 swords. An alliance with the Fremen, you get 6 swords on reveal. This card can single-handedly win you conflicts and get you the necessary Spice to play Highliner. In combination with cards like Carry-All and Spice Smugglers, it can also lead to victory points. It's just a badass card for 6, and it's going straight to S tier. So interestingly, this tier list is kind of inverted. You would expect that there would be fewer S tier cards and more trash cards, but the truth is that the majority of the cards in both the S and A tiers can lead you to victory points based on their build. A lot of those S and A tier cards, though, are also cards that are cost efficient or produce massive amounts of value for their steep cost. If I had to summarize cards in a sentence, I would say think about when you're acquiring the card, right? Cards like Dagger, Dune the Desert Planet, and Reconnaissance are all you have at the start, so they're necessary to get victory points, and for that reason they're B tier. But cards like Shawnee, Duck in Idaho, and Assassination Mission sort of provide the worst of both worlds, and for their costs, they're either difficult to use or clunky. In general, remember to steer yourself towards cards that you're comfortable playing or revealing, such as Carry-All, The Voice, Worm Riders, The Fear Hawat, Lady Jessica, Peter, Firm Grip. All those cards have play and reveal effects that are beneficial to the player. And with that, I'm not going to prattle on any longer. Thank you for watching my tier list. If you disagree or have other suggestions or I missed a card, please let me know. As far as I know, this is the first video like it of its kind for Dune Imperium Digital 2023. If you want to see gameplay of Dune Imperium, I have some gameplays on my channel, and I'm also planning on doing a Dune Imperium review in the next video. Let me know if you would like that in the comments. I'll see you next time. Peace.